Welcome everybody to this Tuesday night Dhamma program with Dhamma Darini in Northern California. I am putting up an image from Anuradhapura of the Samadhi Buddha image. The posture of the hands is representing meditation. And this image is placed at the foot of the Anuradhapura Bodhi tree in Sri Lanka. After his full awakening, the Buddha remained for a full week in meditation underneath the Bodhi tree, contemplating dependent origination. And then the second week he went and sat under a different tree. And went on like that for 7 weeks with his unity and gratitude to the trees, what the trees represented. I believe that meditation must have been different back then, when people did not have as much intensity with society. They didn't have as much intensity with different kinds of media, and they didn't have such a lethargic lifestyle, spending so much time sitting in chairs, and spending vastly more time standing and walking outside in the open air. At a time when perhaps nature itself was much more abundant than it is now, when the number of different species could have been a lot more, the number of creatures could have been a lot more, when a person could go into the forest and pick some fruits and nuts off the trees, or find some mushrooms, and be able to live from the bounty of nature, because nature itself was bountiful enough in proportion to the number of mammals who were around in need of food. Mm. This is not to say that the incredible capacity of humanity for cruelty and the suffering of disease and so forth would have been just as intense, if not more so, in the old days than it is now. So the sense of danger, uncertainty, risk to one's continued life could have been very great at any time. A snake or an animal could take your life, or somebody could have a fall, or, in many ways, life could be cut short. But even with so much uncertainty, there was also this tremendous beauty, the beauty of nature. Wherever we happen to be sitting tonight, I thought it would be useful to uh, do the contemplation on the elements by imagining leaving the city behind and being in the forest and leaving the trees behind and just imagining space and so forth like that. Mm. Uh, welcome to come to an upright and balanced meditation posture, setting the body in a way that we can keep still for about 40 minutes, being aware of the weight of the body resting on the seat or the cushion, and of the uprightness of the back, or if you need to lean on a chair or something, being aware of that also. Just aware of the posture of the body and the situation in the room where you are. And taking some minutes to acknowledge the six senses and the sensations arising from that. Even with the eyes open for a moment, acknowledge seeing the colors and shapes. And even with the eyes closed, one can see the darkness of the closed eyes. Acknowledging hearing whatever sound is present. And acknowledging smelling with the nose, any scent or aroma in the house where you are. Acknowledging tasting, if there's any taste in the saliva in the mouth. And acknowledging touching with the body. aware of the entire body from head to toe and any sensation touching the body. And acknowledging the mind as a sense faculty that knows and puts together the sensations coming through all those other gates. Just being alive, alert, aware, even sitting quietly. So many ways that we are touched by the senses constantly. Staying awake and alert, letting the objects that might come to mind disappear. So hearing my voice, let that sound be just a sound. Let Sobhana disappear. Let the room where you're sitting disappear. Letting the chair where you're sitting or the cushion disappear. There's just the touch, the pressure. But ignore the seat. Whatever sensation comes to awareness, only take the vibration at the gate of the senses without going out to objects, keeping the mind just floating in awareness. If the mind is wandering, come to the touching sensation, the touch of the breath, the touch of the hands, the touch of the body on the seat or the cushion. If the mind is very calm and still, then don't force it. Simply stay open. and bringing the thought of boundless compassion, filling the entire space in every direction, wishing for all beings to be freed from dukkha, freed from the cause of dukkha, in every direction, all around, without any limit, to all as to myself. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sanghang namasami. So I thought of speaking about dependent origination, but trying to speak more, not so much technical, but from the heart about how this practice has been beneficial to me to the extent that I've had any success with that particular contemplation. Mm. The common formulation that we see more often than the others is in terms of the 12 steps of dependent origination. And that particular list is truly about the origin, how we got here, or you could say, how did I get into this mess? Uh, uh, Beings are naturally curious about the cause of things, the source and origin of things, and there's a certain kind of way in which the steps of dependent origination are kind of a dialogue with the other religious systems at the time, and what they had put forward as kind of like a mythology about the origin of the world. Since we don't necessarily have a connection with those other stories, they can be a reason why the dependent origination seems sometimes kind of difficult to understand. In particular, uh, there's a kind of a creation myth. Uh, you could see this in the Nasadya Sutta in the Rig Veda, and also in the Christian Bible. The idea that there was a watery, dark, formless kind of a state before the world came into existence, and in in some kind of a colorful way, you can imagine the darkness of ignorance to be like that darkness of state of the world before creation started. Uh, and then the uh, within that watery, empty, dark, formless emptiness, there came to be a creation, like uh, when God said, "Let there be light," uh, and in a certain way, the sankhara. That's from because of ignorance. There came to be sankhara, or the formations, the creation of arising of karma. I don't really like to emphasize this very much, but I think that uh, it does. Uh, what we could see is that the Buddha rejected the creation mythology that had been handed down, and instead of putting out a story about the creation of the world, instead he had a kind of a humility to only point at the way that the human mind, if we have the ability to see back into the past, there's not the ability to go back all the way to the starting point. In other religions, I can't speak with very much certainty about the Vedic tradition, but I know that in Western religions, there's a certain style of religious belief that imagines that the very center of what is divine, or what they think that God is something that's completely empty, dark, without having any features or any qualities at all that you could point to. So in a way, like when we contemplate emptiness, there's a different kind of way that Christian tradition contemplates. It's called apophatic. They contemplate this sort of sublime, mysterious, dark, unknowable emptiness, which is the source wherein all of creation emerges out of that darkness. And so, in that way, we see the humor of the Buddha, because in those kind of mystical religious traditions, that dark, mysterious, featureless darkness is imagined to be the very best thing, imagined to be like the highest possible quality, to just try to come into a unity with that emptiness there, which is like the fountain of creation. But in dependent origination, the Buddha is naming the darkness as avidya, or ignorance. So if you're ignorant, it doesn't have any features, you don't know anything. So it is dark because you don't know anything. You're not experiencing anything. But the ignorance in Buddhism is not the mysterious, mystical, religious, unknowable thing that you go into an ecstatic trance about. Instead, in this dependent origination, the avidya is the beginning of our trouble, the beginning of our problems. And so he takes the whole thing and kind of turns it upside down. This is a way that the Buddha was often very, I could say, playful with the other traditions. There's a sutta called Aganya Sutta in the Digha Nikaya, which is an extremely funny sutta. But he said that there was a time when the sentient beings lived in a realm of streaming radiance where there was light They were mind-made. They fed on rapture. They were self-luminous. They were completely glorious. And they were like that for a long period of time. And then the cosmos went into a time of expansion. And then it became completely dark. The sun and the moon could not be found. The stars and constellations could not be found. There was no night or day, no months or fortnights, years or seasons, no male or female. The beings were just known as beings. And they lived on, when it was bright, they lived on the radiance. And when it became dark, the radiance curdled into a kind of a nectar, like the way the skin would form on the milk if it's sitting on the pan. So this nectar was created. And it was beautiful, fragrant, and delicious, like the best ghee. It was as sweet as pure honey. And then one of the beings was reckless and thought, what might this be? And they tasted that solid nectar with their finger. And when they tasted it, craving was born in them. Uh, and then they started to eat the nectar and breaking it into lumps. And as they started to eat and started to save up and like store a supply of nectar in case they needed some later on, then they lost their luminosity. And then the stars and constellations appeared. Day and night was distinguished. There were months and fortnights, years and seasons, and male and female. The bodies became solid. Some of the bodies were beautiful, and some of them were ugly. And the beautiful ones would look down on the ugly ones and says, "Where are the beautiful ones? Here are the ugly ones." And so then vanity happened, and and gradually the beings declined into a state of becoming ever more gross and suffering, pain, doing unwholesome things, doing crime. And then because there was crime, then they had to get a government to punish the criminals. And then when they had a government, then they began to have wars. And the whole world descended and declined. It finally got to such a terrible point that it was sort of like contemporary society. The world agreed to have certain intervals of time in which it would be legal to kill other human beings. And those periods were called war. And they also had begun to experience shame around sexuality. And young children became sexualized and treated as objects of sexual desire. Uh, in that sutta, uh, uh, the during a time of war, a few people decide to run away and hide out from the war, and they go into the forest and live on all the roots of trees and the fruits and nuts that they could find. And they stay hiding until the war is over. And then they come out and look around, and they find this is a desolate wasteland now. They find their friends, and they say, "Oh, friend, are you alive? Hello, friend. So happy to see you." And and then they have an idea. They think, suppose we were to give up killing and stop with the stealing, with the falsehoods, the sexual misconduct, and the greed for intoxicants. And with that decision, those pioneers of goodness turned the wheel on this downward sled. Creation had been going down into more and more suffering, and they turned it around, and they brought it into a state which came to be a synergy of virtue, and they practiced meditation. They developed wisdom, and eventually they became fully enlightened. And when all of the beings had transcended the material earthly sphere and gone to the heavenly sphere, so there were no more creatures, no insects or birds or worms or people, or no creatures at all were left in the material realm. All of them had become devas or brahmas in the divine realm. And then at that moment, the world disappeared, and only the heavenly realm existed. What I take from this in terms of dependent origination is that actually this world in which we exist right now is completely a creation, just like the story of the Aganya Sutta is a creation and a fable. So in a similar kind of way, the human being and the creatures, all the animals, all the sentient beings, they acquired senses and bodies and minds, but they also imagined a world, and the world that we imagine is the world that we have to live in. There's a certain kind of way that the downhill sled of a dependent origination, starting from ignorance, with the karma, the sankhara, or the causal conditions, the formations, what we did in the past. Uh, 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 this is like everything that happened before. And it's not only what happened in this lifetime, but what happened through countless lifetimes, which is manifesting in the kind of body that we have. So it says those first few stages, from the ignorance comes conditional formations or comic formations, and then from that comes the arising of consciousness and name and form, which are the two things that are interdependent. And this is what happens when a person or a being comes to be born. The consciousness and the name and form, or the physical body and the mental features of a being, arise together in a state of interdependence on each other. So, and this is dukkha. It's so tiresome to be a human being with all of the impulses and instincts and tendencies that a human being has. Even the way that a human being is born with this fountain of creativity, which is able to imagine things and plan out things and decide to do things, and then we get to go and do the things that we decided to do, and to struggle with a reality to get a reality to conform with our wishes, and so then we kind of get on this treadmill of activity and doing, and it's so tiresome, so weary, and the kind of world that we create is, you could say it from a, a Western point of view, that it's both got a material base, and it's also got a cultural base that's inherited. So when we got born as a human in a particular time and place, we got born into a culture, and the culture created a very constrained kind of a boundary of what we're able to imagine, what we're able to conceive of, is limited by the things that are thoughts that are allowed to be thought within our culture, and it becomes, it's like a kind of a trap. I look at the Samadhi Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree. He's already out of it. He's no longer trapped and bound up in that way, and yet he spent his time uh, contemplating the arising of dukkha and all of the conditions through beginningless time that lead beings to be bound up, to come into existence with so much being in a pattern bound for perpetuating dukkha. And it seems to me that this is one of the great lessons of dependent origination, is compassion. Compassion. When you understand how awful it is to be trapped in samsara, if you really understand it, then the only answer is compassion. And this is why the Sammasambuddha was the compassionate Buddha, the one who had found the escape and then who spent the 50 years walking up and down India, looking for beings who were able to understand, and using his abilities to teach them and help them, and doing this continuously, right up to the very end, to the last moments before his parinibbana, when he finally gave up that earthly existence. He was constantly teaching, helping, supporting, taking anybody who had a glimmer of that possibility of awakening, and giving them the pointer, showing them the way, and that Sammasambuddha was so compassionate as to teach in many different ways for different types of people, but also to give a systematic teaching, so that there's the possibility that even if you might not be able to understand it now, it might be just a list of words to you now, or you might just have the slightest glimmer of understanding, or it might be that, like independent origination, there's a few parts of it that you could say, oh yes, I really understand that part. And then other parts that are just not yet possible. But the Buddha gave a path of practice. He gave the Eightfold Path out of his compassion. So one of the big takeaways for me about dependent origination is having compassion. I do tend to take those first few steps of dependent arising, especially the ignorance and the sankhara, or the formations, as being a kind of like a summary of everything that happened previous. And that then the consciousness and the name and form being a description of the arising of this mind, which this consciousness, which is only able to experience the things that are arising through the senses and through the contact, because of being in that interdependent relationship with this living piece of meat, which is this body and this brain, and all of these nervous cells and those electrical impulses and all of the things that are happening in the physical body, and then the different aspects of the mental process that are summarized in what's called name. Okay, so here's how it was in the Upanishads. Name and form were sort of like mystical. So you had a situation. I'm giving you the Prasna Upanishad in a brief summary. So each individual thing, like a particular river, has its own form, its own shape, and its quality, and it has its own name. It has its own unique, special identity. And then just the way that the river flows down and joins the ocean and loses its distinct identity and just becomes merged into the great ocean, So in this teaching, consciousness is taken to be like an oceanic, eternal, infinite, divine, cosmic state, and you are longing for the day when your limited identity as being an individual with a name who's trapped in your particular circumstances and in your particular identity is trying to break loose from that entity and then become merged into the cosmic consciousness. That's what they're striving for. And the Buddha said, no, 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 that's not it at all. It's completely the opposite. So that the consciousness is just even more momentary than even the body. Even, like my fingernails last longer than my consciousness, because the consciousness is coming and going within a moment, and my fingernails might last a couple of weeks or something before all the cells in the fingernails get replaced. Um, um, but the in general in the early text, when they talk about the name and form, they are talking about the process of a living person, somebody who was born, who got conceived, who came into the mother's womb, or took the material form in whatever way, or took the whatever form of existence they took. Um, uh, and then later on, uh, it, okay, I'll give you another metaphor too. I don't think this really exists in early Buddhism, but in the later ideas, there's the idea of the subject and the object, a kind of a duality. That if I identify myself as being the subjective person who's experiencing all my experiences, and I think that I've got this kind of like a naive realism. I think that the self is a real thing, and I think that the other people and the other objects are also real things, and that I am experiencing those objects and those other people, those other creatures, that other society, this other world. And so there's like the self is in a kind of a polarized situation with the world. The world is out there, and the self is in here. Um, uh, this can be symbolized into a great polarization of the world where, like I read to you, that it became separated into darkness and light, or into the passage of time and the seasons. In Egyptian mythology, what happened in the creation myth, there was a cosmic cow who came into existence and who stood up. And the cow is holding up the sky. And all of the civilization along the banks of the Nile River are uh, living under the protection of this cosmic cause. That's the separation. Heaven and earth became two separated things. And then God, instead of being something that was in us, God is something up there. And we become more and more sad because we feel so alienated and separated, because we think that God is up there, but we can't find him. Uh, so the Buddha borrowed the words name and form, gave them a completely different meaning, as describing the way in which it is true. Like there is that in Sri Lanka, there is that Anuradhapura, there is that Bodhi tree, there is that statue, there are those people, you all, there are the people in this room. We're not saying that the reality doesn't exist, but what the Buddha was saying is that what a person experiences is not those objects out there. Instead, what a person experiences is what the mind fabricates under the influence of culture and all of the other conditions where they are getting the contact through the senses, and then something is created in the mind, and it's kind of like a guess at what the reality is, and so I see Venerable Dhammanusari is next to me, and I see you. I think it's you, but really it's only something in my mind. Is the only one I see. But uh, uh, we well, that's a whole other thought. Uh, uh, so in that way, the way that the Buddha drew a picture of like how we experience anything, how we know anything, how our existence is happening in this way, which is very naturalistic, that you can to some extent observe it in your own process, and that's as a putting. I'm getting very interdenominational now. You put new wine in an old flask or something like that. So the Buddha put new wine into the old container when he put these new ideas into that sequence at the beginning of dependent origination. I think I'm going to wait until next Tuesday to talk about the middle part of dependent origination, about how contact leads to the feeling, which leads to craving. And that's the psychological part of dependent origination that we can experience either with real disappointment, and it's like, why does the mind keep doing the same thing over and over again? It keeps on having the same responses over and over again. But then when we come to a state of detachment from that process, then we can start to find the space of freedom, even while our brain is still, or the eyes and the sense organs and all those things are still doing the same things as they were doing before, but we're no longer trapped. So just in terms of the first beginning, that considering everything that went before, that leads us to the circumstance we're in right now, which is a real mixed bag, how that is the base for real compassion, and considering how the self idea doesn't really pertain, and how the quest to become merged with a cosmic consciousness or with some kind of mysterious divine entity is also completely wiped away by this different presentation that the Buddha is giving in those first steps. So he's taking the first steps of dismantling avidya by dismantling wrong view by showing a naturalistic, scientific, and accessible way to understand how uh, uh, everything that happened before caused us to be where we are and who we are and what we are right now. I'm going to invite your comments and questions for the next few minutes. Okay, I'll call on Ren.
Hi, Ayya. Thank you. I want to just check my understanding about what you shared. The idea of in the beginning where there's like formless light being, and then how things just kind of get complicated or heavier, and the starts to differentiate into this samsara world that we experience currently. And then the idea is to understand that and practice to go back to the earlier stage, basically, to like kind of escape from all this dukkha and the suffering that is current in this current world. So it feels to me like it's not an idea of sin, as in, oh, you did something wrong and then now you're suffering and you got to repent. It's more like, it feels like a story of evolution, almost like an entropy. It's like something is pure and then suddenly it just get more and more complicated and get chaotic, and then we just need to go back early on. So this is my question. If my understanding is close to what the idea is, then wouldn't it make sense that after you go back to the earlier state, that entropy will continue to happen, then it becomes convoluted again? And so it's not like a story of, oh, how we're there and then we sunk to the bottom and we have to go back, but then it sounds like it's cyclical, wouldn't it? Because if it's not cyclical, we wouldn't have sunk to begin with.
Right. Well, that empathetic approach is exactly how I feel about it. And it's like all of the choices that I made before, through all my lifetimes, I didn't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I made the choices I made. I didn't know, so I made a bunch of choices. And look what it got me, this human birth in this world. So not an idea of sin, but an idea of really truly an idea of compassion.
I guess my question is, how the goal is like to escape rebirth, right? I don't see how that's possible, because even if we understood to a point where we could escape rebirth back to that pureness, right? But the pureness inevitably will go round again, right? Into this sinking into a weightier existence until we slowly elevate ourselves again. So I see it as a cyclical thing, because if it's not, then why would impurity happen from the beginning? We wouldn't have any impurity, but it happened. So even when we go back up, it'll still cycle, wouldn't it?
My idea is that it's very natural that one cannot see the end of conditions until you wake up. Before you wake up, you can't see it. So this is why the Buddha gave a gradual training, and he gave a Noble Eightfold Path. And he suggests the advice is do good, avoid evil, purify the mind, and practice. And then the day will come when you will be able to see. You will be able to have a glimpse. I think like even I had experiences when I was, especially when I was a newbie in Buddhism, that I had some really horrible, bad mental habits, bad psychological habits, and and they were like lifted. It would be like having being addicted to something, and through a miracle cure, the addiction is lifted, and you really know that like for the rest of your life, never again are you going to want to pick up that substance again, because that pattern is broken and it's not coming back, and and it's because of seeing that that we get to have like a confidence that if we keep going on this path, that then it will become possible to really directly see and experience cessation.
So what you're saying, I think, is to not rely on just the logical understanding of the concept. It's really need to be experienced because if I'm just using logical, reasoning, it seems like it's cyclical. But I think what you're saying is that drop that idea and
Mhm.
really truly really get it in a
Yeah.
non-logical way.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ayya.
I'm so excited that there's a line of people who are going to give some comments and teach us. So I'm going to call on Chintana and then Richard and then Ananaya and then Nyada. You're going to be the last, so think of something to say.
All right. Thank you for your teaching. My question is there a beginning to dependent origination?
There's not a beginning, but there is an end.
Okay.
Or the beginning cannot be found, but the end can be found and can be experienced.
Okay. Thank you.
It's the opposite of Christianity, which does have a beginning but doesn't have an end. Right? So, um, okay. Thank you for asking. I'll call on Richard.
That question in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Tens, Sutta 61, bhikkhus. This is said, a first point of ignorance, bhikkhus, is not seen such that before this there was no ignorance, and afterwards it came into being. Still, ignorance is seen to have a specific condition. So what this means is that you have a certain idea in your mind right now. Let's say, you think you're a Christian, but then someone convinces you that the Muslim religion is the true one. Well, you give up being a Christian, now you're a Muslim, right? They're both, and I'm not picking on these religions, but I'm saying that they're both unknowing conditions because they're just based on belief. Okay, there's no real proof of a God or anything like that. So these are just, and then maybe another day you might be some other thought. Maybe you'll be a nihilist or something. So 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 Buddha says there's no first point that ignorance, can be seen to come into being, but various ignorances, and I'm just giving, that was a large category. You can have minor categories, right? Oh, they love me. Oh, they love me not. Whatever, you know, or I like this, or I don't like that anymore. Whatever, those are just all different variations on the theme. Now, to get to Ren's question, I think she was mistaking what you said for these beings living on bliss in light as like a final nirvana. All right. So no, that's just a position that beings, when the whole universe as we know it contracts so that it cannot support any kind of living being anymore, all beings rise up to that point. and just sort of float in an ignorant condition. It's not that they get there because they became some level of enlightenment or something. Even the Brahmas don't even know about that existence. That's why they end up in that existence. And then the first being that the universe can support as it begins to manifest again are Brahmas. So one of the Brahmas falls, they say he falls out of that world. You know, he comes back down to the mentality that he's more familiar with. While he's in that state, that's kind of like, it's sort of like in between the highest Brahma level. You don't see it specifically mentioned so much in the formless realms. It's like they call it the unconscious beings. That's really what they mean. They're not dualistically consciously aware. They're just kind of just there, you know, but they don't really know why they're there. They have no idea, you know, because they're still in ignorance, or like I prefer to say, you know, incomplete knowledge. So anyways, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Anyways, it's a category mistake. That you weren't talking about fully enlightened beings, and
No.
that we're going to go there, and that's a place that we can fall out of again. Full
Right.
enlightenment, you cannot fall away from. Thank you.
Ananaya.
Actually, I was responding to Ren, and Richard pretty much laid it out. But I guess in simple terms, what I was going to say is that, yeah, Ren was mistaking the cyclical nature of samsara and the rising and falling, over cycles of time here in this plane. But that isn't nibbana. That's just how it is. That's here. And Richard gave a fuller explanation of the long cycles of time, the eons, because the earth and etc. does disappear at points, and so, you know, and then it begins again, as Richard pointed out. But that the main thing is that when the Buddha left, or all the arahants are attain nibbana, it's like they're not coming back here. There is not a descent into anything at that point, which Richard pointed out.
Thank you. Now I'm going to call on Nyada, and you'll be the last person to make a comment tonight.
Thank you, Ajahn. How are you? Okay. I know this is not easy to understand about samsara. We all just come in because we not know. We come and rebirth in this life because we not know. Now we try to understand something that we not know before. But as far as I been learned Abhidhamma, is have a place for they devise out by the word of Buddha, 31 places to get out of samsara. This is called samsara. The whole thing is called samsara, 31 places. None of this, we don't need to be in here because it come back in the root. So we have to make all the way through out of this samsara, you know. So it means we got to do all the very good deed, even the place of Deva or Brahma. We don't try to think or make in Sankara that we want that because it's so wonderful place to be. You know, when you're hungry, you just think, oh, I want to have that and feel in my tummy. You know, we don't. If you want to get out of samsara, you have to let go everything that your mind want to be in. Let me say that. It's not easy to understand. Even myself, even, you know, because to be Arahant, who is enlightening, to who it be out of samsara, that person have to know all the defile. That person have to have eliminate all those asava killet that is not just be in this life, that been correct for many lives. You have to kind of like eliminate all those to be able to get out of samsara. So it's not easy, but it have a sample that a lot of monks even some so-called magi or even a regular person attempt to be done. So this is, it depends upon to you to go back and study, and it's good thing we sit down here and discuss to share the idea, because that is the way to pick up a new angle of thought to try to make ourselves to get out of samsara. Thank you so much, Ajahn.
Okay, thank you for those inspiring words. And with that, I think we can give our closing homage to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Araham Samma Sambuddha Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantam Abhivademi Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sangham Namami.
Thank you so much, Ajahn.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Everyone.
Okay.
See
Thank
you
you,
next
everyone.
time.
Thank you.